Hey guys, Mrhappy here, and today we are going to do a guide for Turn 2 of the Binding Coil of Bahamut. Turn 2 is a very short one if pulled off successfully, but it requires very exact execution or you will quickly die to the overwhelming number of mechanics that this turn throws at you. First things first, how many bosses are there? Turn 2 consists of a boss gauntlet where you will fight several mini-bosses before tackling the true boss at the end. There are 6 total mini-bosses, each with their own special attack, as well as a number of standard attacks. By killing one of the mini-bosses, you prevent the final boss from using that attack when you reach that part of the encounter. However, you also provide the final boss a buff for each mini-boss that you kill, which we will go over as we discuss each of the mini-bosses. By not killing one of the mini-bosses, you are also allowing the final boss to access that boss's special attacks. Whew! With that out of the way, let's go over what the entire encounter looks like. Let's break it down and figure out which mini-bosses do what. First, I will describe what every boss has in common, then what each mini-boss does, what buff it gives the final boss, and then we'll go over the final boss himself. Upon entering Turn 2, you will immediately be thrust upon the Monitoring Node, a node similar to those that you fought back in Turn 1 during the Allegan Defense System encounter. Despite being one of the mini-nodes, the boss will act more similarly to ADS. The first mechanic you will encounter are the awful camera angles you'll have to deal with. These rooms are really small, so expect to know the backside of your character even better than you already do. Oh, and the entire encounter also has the returning of the click mechanic. This mechanic begins a countdown as soon as the monitoring node is pulled, and will give you approximately 12 minutes to kill as many mini nodes as you can and the final boss. Going in with a plan helps minimize the danger of running out of clicks. Now, there are a few attacks that this node does that every node will do during this encounter. The first is that the monitoring node does a conal attack every time it auto attacks, meaning that it can hit anyone in a cone around its main target. Additionally, these auto attacks will place a debuff on the tank that will increase the amount of damage that they take. This will force a tank swap every few stacks. We found that the first taunt going off at around 3 stacks, and then taunting whenever available after your own stacks had fallen off was an efficient way of dealing with this mechanic. Additionally, tanking the boss with either 90 degrees or 180 degrees separating the two tanks ensured that they did not ever cause the cleave to hit each other or the rest of the raid. It is worth noting that our tanks reported being unable to block or parry these attacks. Next, the monitoring node does repelling cannons, a melee range AoE that both the tanks and the melee should consciously make an effort to avoid, just like you did in Turn 1. And finally, every single node has high voltage, the raid-wide AoE that does moderate lightning damage and paralyzes everybody hit. Remember, it's not dispellable by Asuna or leeches. You've dealt with this and the cannons in the previous phases of Bahamut's coil, so they shouldn't be too difficult to deal with now. The only difference may be timing your taunts while also avoiding repelling cannons without sacrificing your position too much. But if you're quick, the boss will change slightly, but not too much. So the boss should stay in roughly the same positions throughout the entire encounter, as you can see while we are doing it. So, as all the mini-nodes share those 3 same mechanics, now let's begin talking about the mechanics individual to each mini-node. The monitoring node's only unique mechanic is that he will occasionally pulse unavoidable AoE damage onto the raid. Approximately 300 damage. Stone Skin and Sakura works wonders towards reducing this damage, but honestly, a simple Medica 2 every once in a while should completely counter the damage dealt here. Anything else is just extra. After defeating the monitoring node, all nodes you fight from now on will have a buff that increases the physical damage that they deal. We found this buff to be extremely odd since their basic attacks could not be blocked or parried, thus it's debatable to call it physical damage. Regardless, we'll just say it makes the rest of the nodes hit harder. Additionally, you are given the option to go east or west down the hill, allowing you to pick the next node that you fight. As in this video, my footage goes west. I will begin talking about the nodes on this side. Before the final boss, I will pause what we are doing and make note of all the other mechanics, including their abilities and buffs. You will witness these attacks during the fight against the final boss, so just so you'll have a visual of what they look like should you decide to fight some of the other mini nodes that we didn't. The next boss fight we know is the Sanitary node, and it is located to the west of the Monitoring node. This boss will obtain the buff from defeating the monitoring node as well as perform a new move called Baltast. This move is nearly instant cast. When the sanitary node casts it, he will pick a random direction to face. After a short period, 3 red rings will appear around his body, one after the other, in a 270 degree arc behind where he is currently facing. When these rings perform the attack, each attack will deal a high amount of water damage and knock you back into the next ring, essentially throwing anyone hit across the room and dealing massive damage to them. There are 2 ways of avoiding this move. One is to simply run directly away from the boss as soon as he casts it. Worst case scenario doing this is that you only get hit by the last wave, greatly reducing the damage you might take if you attempt the other method we're going to say of dodging. The other method is to stand in front of the boss when he picks a direction in that 90 degree arc that is not marked with a red indicator. This is extremely risky though, because it is entirely possible the boss will then auto attack while Baltast is being performed and cleave all the targets hit. That means if both tanks successfully move in front of the boss, your off tank may accidentally replenish the stacking debuff and be forced to wait on it to wear off before tanking, which will greatly increase the amount of damage that they are going to take. Here's how I recommend dealing with Baltast, at least on the mini node. Any melee DPS tank not currently on the boss should do their best to run out of range of the attacks, while the current main tank attempts to position himself in the safe area. If your tank is a paladin and he is unsure of his ability to dodge the move, he should pop Tempered Will to greatly reduce the damage taken, since he won't be knocked back into the subsequent rings. Defeating the sanitary node will prevent the final boss from using this move, but will grant him and all the other nodes a buff that increases their piercing resistance, making dragoons and bards deal approximately 25% less damage. Once you've dealt with this mechanic a few times, as well as silencing some high voltages and dodging some repelling cannons, 2 more doors will open. One will lead east to the boss that you chose not to fight previously, and the other will head south. We chose to go south next. The boss south of the sanitary node is the attack node. Other than the monitoring node, this is by far the easiest of the mini nodes to deal with. The node's only special attack is to place a gravity field on the floor every 30 seconds on a single target that slows their movement speed and deals trivial damage per second. Additionally, this node will grant the final boss and all other nodes an increase in blunt resistance, reducing damage dealt by monks by about 25%. We chose to move on to the final boss after killing this node, but for the sake of a true guide, let's quickly discuss what the other 3 nodes do before discussing how they will affect this final encounter. Should you have chosen east instead of west after the monitoring node, you will have encountered the defense node. This node does a move called Chain Lightning, which will bounce between targets that are in range of each other, dealing moderate damage to each of them. The damage does not increase or decrease for each target hit, it seems to remain static. The range on this node's Chain Lightning appears to be about 15 to 20 yalms per jump. With the size of the room, it is very likely that most of your raid will be hit by this unless you are really spread out. Additionally, when defeated, the defense node will increase the final boss's slashing resistance, causing tanks to deal about 25% less damage. This also means 25% less enmity, so watch yourselves at the start of the rest of the fights after you kill the defense node. South of the defense node is the disposal node. This boss's special attack is Fire Stream. After a short delay, similar to Baltast, it will charge a move in 5 directions. Anyone hit by the attack will suffer moderate initial damage as well as extremely high damage over time. Keeping the boss in a static position will always cause the Fire Stream to cast in approximately the same 5 directions, meaning that the attack is based on the node's current position and the direction he is facing. Keep in mind that the tanks will need to dodge this as well. After being defeated, the disposal node will grant the final boss and all other nodes increased magic defense, reducing black mage and summoner damage by about 25%. The final node is in the very south room, the quarantine node. This node is only accessible by taking the western path after the monitoring node south of the attack node. This boss's special attack is Allagan Rot. This attack will place a debuff on a random party member. Keep in mind that this can also be the tank. The node will place a red target line between him and his target when casting it, so you can notice it if you're careful when it's going off. This rot stays on a target for about 12 seconds, dealing no damage and having no other special effects. If the person with the rot moves next to another target, the rot will transfer to them and give the previous player a 40-second immunity to receiving the rot again. Should the rot not be passed to another player after 12 seconds, it will do massive raid-wide damage, most likely instant killing everyone. Should you somehow survive the Allagan Rot exploding, the boss will simply cast it again and you will have to deal with it again. Seems like a no-brainer that you'd want to remove that from the fight, right? Unfortunately, no. In fact, that's the last thing you want to do. Not only does fighting the quarantine node cause you to lose a lot of time on the boss by forcing you to fight a 4th mini node, but when he dies, the boss is granted a massive haste buff. This reduced the casting and recast time of all of his moves by about 50%. This means he'll do high voltage approximately every 9 seconds, and it will have about a 1 second cast time. Trust me, you don't want to deal with this. Just be prepared to deal with Allagan Rot on the boss. Don't even consider it an option. So now that we've gone over all 6 mini nodes, it's time to face the final boss, the Allagan defense system. I'm sure you figured it out just by reading the point of your mission, but he's back and he's bigger and better than ever. Remember that strategy we are using for the boss assumes that he has Allagan Rot, Chain Lightning, and Fire Stream. So that is what this strategy will be based around, although I will make note of the other abilities he can possibly have and when he will obtain them should you have picked a different path. He will also have increased physical damage, piercing resistance, and blunt resistance in the video you are watching. Keep this in mind as we discuss our strategy for the fight. The first 25% of the fight will be incredibly familiar to you, as ADS has retained all of his moves from turn 1, though he doesn't do them in quite the same order. He has inherited the cleaving ability of the previous node, so tank swaps will remain static throughout the fight. He will still cast the abilities High Voltage, Repelling Cannons, and Piercing Laser, which hasn't made an appearance until now in this turn. So the order in which these moves is performed is slightly different, however. He also does them less frequently, it seems. High Voltage is still about an 18-second cooldown. However, after he does High Voltage, he tends to do Piercing Laser instead of Repelling Cannons, opposite to what he did in turn 1. This too, however, is not always the same and will change greatly throughout the fight. As for tank position, as you can see, we do tank him with the tanks 180 degrees apart from each other. This is to more properly deal with the repelling cannons and fire stream constantly causing you to run away from the boss, without running him into anyone else. You can choose to tank him on any side of the room, we just like this area and are comfortable with it. Additionally, the mechanic from the monitoring node appears to carry over into this fight, despite it being the special ability that he does. It seems the monitoring node doesn't follow the same rules as all the other nodes, and when you kill him, his ability actually doesn't lock. So the only thing that's different about this move during ADS is that it does significantly more damage. This move will deal about 600 damage every 3 seconds to the entire raid, as opposed to the 300 that the monitoring node was doing. The easiest way to deal with this is still Medica 2's Stone Skin and Succor, though don't always expect the regen and shield to leave you permanently topped off. Throughout the fight at set percentages, the boss will absorb the nodes you did not kill before engaging him. The order of the nodes he absorbs seems to work that he starts in the southmost region, the southmost room, which means that the Allagan Rot node will always be first. He will always absorb the quarantine node, followed by either the attack or disposal node, followed by either the sanitary or defense node. Of course, this changes based on which nodes you actually kill, as it is entirely possible with super high DPS to kill all but the attack and quarantine node before engaging the boss. At 75%, the boss will absorb the first node, the quarantine node, and this is by far the most difficult part of the fight. Now empowered with the ability to cast Allagan Rot, he will waste no time doing so. He immediately picks a target, and now the Rot game begins, as I like to call it. For the rest of the encounter, you must ensure that the Rot is properly passed between targets, and this can be done in a number of ways. We opt in for having an all-ranged composition and simply stacking everybody up in a timely manner to ensure that, as long as everyone survives and stays bunched up, that the Rot will pass automatically whenever someone's immunity falls off. For this timing to work correctly, a new person must obtain the Rot when its duration on its previous target is at approximately 8 seconds remaining. A little bit less is fine. Anywhere between 8 and 4 is optimal. Should the timing go off at any point, should the process be too fast or too slow, then the immunity may not fall off at the right time, resulting in an instant wipe. This also calls for 5 people to stack up. Stacking this many people is just the right number for us, and here's why. Stacking too many people causes you to require a different timing. We include one of our healers in the group to help AoE heal us, and one healer stationary off on the side to draw piercing lasers and allow them to heal the tanks without having to move as much. Speaking of piercing lasers, remember that now you must dodge all the lasers as a group, so try and organize which direction you're going to be moving once you group up like this. Another strategy that is more melee friendly is to designate a spot in the room where the infected person will always stand. Then set up an order of people who will run to that spot and take the rot off of the previous target. This may cause the melee to be of any range at the boss at all times, but it does safely handle this mechanic of the fight and work for any composition of players. Your melee DPS are just going to have to sacrifice some of their damage. You may also choose our strategy, but any melee that is part of the rotation can actually move in and out of ADS's attack range depending on the remaining time for their immunity, staying in the group just long enough to receive the rot and then pass it on to another target before returning to DPS the boss. Basically a mix of the previous two strategies. Additionally, when the node is absorbed, the boss's rotations will become slightly off time. This may cause both of your silencers to have their silence up and ready for high voltage. Make sure to communicate whose turn it is to silence as to not accidentally cause one target to silence too early or too late. You'll see in this video that we actually miss one silence, and then he absorbs a node, does another move, and then I miss the next silence. So in most circumstances, this will result in an instant wipe, but be ready for such a thing to happen, which will cause high voltages to happen far sooner than expected. At 50%, the boss will absorb the next node, which in our case is the disposal node. Should you have killed the disposal node, he should instead absorb the attack node. Once absorbing the disposal node, he will make use of Fire Stream every 20 to 25 seconds, which acts exactly like its predecessor. Keep in mind that every time he casts this, the timing for all of his other moves will be slightly thrown off again. This is also entirely possible for him to use repelling cannons and piercing laser at nearly identical times, so you may need to dodge multiples of these moves. If you are using a strategy similar to ours, then the entire group simply dodges the fire stream in the same direction while also avoiding piercing laser in the same direction, continuing to deal with all the mechanics previously present in the fight. At 25%, the boss will absorb the final node, in our case, the defense node. Should you have killed the defense node, he will absorb the sanitary node. I completely despise the idea of this boss having access to Baltast, so please don't force me to imagine it. In our case, he gains access to Chain Lightning. Due to the small nature of this room and the fact that most of us are grouped up, it is very likely that this will hit almost everyone in your raid for about 1500 damage whenever it is cast. He also likes to immediately follow it up with Piercing Laser, just in an attempt to pick off any stragglers who may be panicking and don't dodge the laser quickly enough. And once you are managing to deal with all of that, you will basically just have to deal with that for the last 25% of his health, and then you will successfully kill the Allegan defense system. So in the end, here is what this turn requires you to do. First, predetermine a set path of mini nodes that you want to kill. Do so while still having enough time to deal with the boss before he enrages, which is about 12 minutes. Heal past the 600 damage being dealt every 3 seconds on the Allegan defense system himself. Silence high voltage throughout the entire turn, and especially on the final fight. This is going to require 2 silencers or 1 extremely skilled monk. Keep in mind that even with a skilled monk, if he gets the Allegan rot and has to move out of melee range, it can get pretty nasty. Avoid repelling cannons and piercing laser just as you did back in turn 1. Properly tank swap whenever the tanks have too high of a debuff count. Successfully pass Allegan Rot between players, successfully dodge Firestream or Gravity Field, successfully deal with Chain Lightning damage or avoid Baltast. Do this all at the same time, and you're looking at 2 more pieces of loot that come right after ADS, and the soon-to-be break that is turn 3. Trust me, I think you're going to love turn 3 after dealing with turn 2. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more Final Fantasy XIV information and more guides. Going to be working on more Coil videos soon. If you have any requests about Coil videos, just let me know. Obviously, I won't be doing a turn 5 video anytime soon. But, you know, turn 1, turn 2, if you have any recommendations, maybe you just want the raw footage of those kills just to see it without any of the cuts or anything, just let me know in the comments below. Also, feel free to contact me on Facebook or Twitter. I have much easier time getting back to people on those platforms than I do getting back to them over YouTube. Ever since hooking it up with Google+, it's just been a disaster. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitch. I have a new streaming schedule where I will stream on Wednesdays and Sundays. Those are scheduled times. However, if you follow me on Twitch, you can also see me stream at other times, maybe when I just have some spare time during the day and I want to spend some time streaming to entertain you guys. I'll be streaming things such as Kingdom Hearts 1.5, Hearthstone, Final Fantasy XIV, though not the Binding Coil of Bahamut, Bahamut, and in the future there will be other games such as Destiny, Watch Dogs, etc. that I will be streaming for you guys. So be sure to check that out and give me a follow. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, take care.